All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Humans or Systems 2, Keeping Leadership in Mind in Disaster Recovery. My name's Kelly. I'm with OATC, but I am mainly just here to introduce the two stars of the show, two North Shore School District All-Stars, known far and wide. First up, we have Shelby Reynolds. She's the Assistant Director for Instructional Technology and Library Services. We also have the lovely Sarah Lawrence, who is Manager of User Services. Now, as a reminder, we have time for a Q&A at the end, which Shelby and Sarah are going to be doing together. Please, please, please put that in the chat. You will want to put it in the Q&A, and that makes sense. But don't. Put it in the chat. And if you do put it in the Q&A, that's okay, but I'm going to copy it over into the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to these two.
Hi, everybody. We're excited to be here.
Hello.
Sarah and I wish so much that we could be in a room at the resort presenting to you, and as we did a couple of years ago, maybe throwing candy your way or putting candy on the tables around the room, because that's definitely a fun North Shore thing to do, but also an ACPE thing to do. Hey, do me a favor, if you would, just so that we know you're listening and engaged, because it's right after lunch. Put what you had for lunch in the chat, please. This will be fun. Oh, coffee.
Coffee. That's all enough.
Josh had a sandwich.
Shelby, what did you have for lunch?
I had some rice crackers from Trader Joe's, because that's easy to eat while you're trying to multitask.
Chex Mix, yes, Carrie.
Spicy Thai basil beef.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I had cold pizza and a chocolate chip cookie.
Well, that sounds good. What kind of pizza?
Homemade. Yeah. Not the pizza, the cookie.
No, what kind of pizza?
Oh, what kind of pizza? Really crappy pizza, just like a frozen. It's just
okay.
Really bad pizza.
It didn't have any toppings or anything? It was just...
pepperoni.
Ah, okay.
Straight up pepperoni. It's cold, best cold. Yeah.
Well, good. What a great way to kick off our session today. You'll find that we'll make a couple of references to food throughout the session, because it's one of the things that makes the world go around and makes people happy. So we've been introduced. You are in the Humans or System 2 session, and we'll get started here.
You're not going to get the nerdy bits here. If you want those pieces of, recovering from a cyber attack and cybersecurity, you would get those from Ski and John Biggerstaff. Attend those sessions; they will be great. But we are going to focus on the people pieces of recovering from a cyber attack or another, handling other crises. Just gonna get my notes fixed over here. So we have a quote here from Mo Carrick. We've done some work in our district with her book, Brave Space Workplace. Say that one 3 times fast. But people are messy. We're complex and diverse and hard to understand without spending time together and communicating. We have needs, many of them, and we don't always know exactly what they are or how to meet them. Most of us come to work wanting to do a good job. And I feel like that just encapsulates me right there.
Yeah, so true. And me.
Yeah.
People are messy. I'm looking around at my home office desk and realizing just how true that is.
And it just gets messier the longer we're in, working from home.
Yeah, and you just compile random bits of junk. I don't know if that's true for anyone in the audience, but if you have a piece of random junk sitting in front of you, either at your workspace or at your home office, tell us what that is in the chat. We're not personally attacking you, Alan.
Mine is a cat-shaped lip balm.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do I have that's random? Oh, I have this.
Funko Pops. I also have kid art. Kid art is on the shelf behind me.
These are like steampunk goggles. I don't know what for. And then this kitchen towel that says on fleek.
I have a bird, which I thought it was a chicken, a bird made out of a pine cone and cotton balls.
Did Abby make that?
Oh, no, I made that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, my 4-year-old.
Kudos either way.
Oh, what do people like? Ghostbusters Lego car. Awesome. I'll take that.
Whoa. Jennifer says she has a copper wand of miracleness.
Do you need her to speak about that?
Maybe at the end. I
Okay.
suppose we should actually give them what they came for.
Yeah, let's do that. So for our session today, we're going to focus on three main things. Before a cyber attack or a crisis, things you can do before to kind of prepare, just proactive things, building trusting relationships, attending to your team and the dynamics of your department. Things to lean on and do in the middle of a crisis. And then, what the important things are to do afterwards that prepare you for the next thing on the horizon. For us, we went straight from cyber attack right into remote learning. So that's been an adventure. And I feel like our response to our cyber attack in September of 2019 uniquely prepared us to take on that challenge and that transition to remote learning during COVID.
Sarah, can you, do you remember the day that you got the call that we were experiencing an event?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. Was it September 19th or 20th, something like that. And it was like something's weird, something's wrong. The Uber nerds, the the Ski and the John Biggerstaff were in the office. And I remember talking to John Wiederspan and saying, "What do you need? I'll bring you some snacks."
Mm-hmm.
So I took him some lunch stuff and ended up staying the afternoon and then spent that entire day Sunday. And I can share some stories about that later. But and from that point, we hit the ground running in our response to that significant cyber attack for the next probably two months.
Yeah. I remember I was at a movie. I was in a movie theater. What is that like? I don't even remember because it's been a while. But I was in a movie theater and I think it was the Downton Abbey movie. Maybe. I don't know. I could have my Anyways, as one does at a movie theater in the olden days, you put your phone on vibrate and you stick it in your pocket, right? And it was probably, 45 minutes before the end. My phone is like freaking out in my pocket. And I'm thinking something might be wrong with my girls. I was just panicked, right? So I take a quick peek, and this is not to belittle anybody in my department, but I saw, it's just texts and chats from Alan to like 3 or 4 other people. And I thought, he's just copying me on things. So I put my phone back in my pocket. When I got out, I went and read the whole thread, and I realized just the immensity, just the freak outness, that's not even a word, but just how big a deal this actually was, and engaged on the phone right away. And then like you spent that Sunday, from early hours to late hours, just trying to get our hands around how to describe the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So just crazy. So with that sort of, frame in mind, there we go. With that sort of frame in mind, we're going to have our first segment of this session really be about how to set up the culture in your district and in your team, and how to, build those relationships across the hallway, so to speak, into other departments and with vendors and other folks to really prepare yourself in the case of emergency, in the case that something like this happens. And we're going to use a frame just to kind of set that environment stage a little bit. This is VUCA. You can Google VUCA and read all you like about it. But essentially, it's a frame that describes ways to sort of categorize the complexities and the ambiguities that we feel in not just situations like this, but in a changing world, especially in technology, where you may have a little bit of knowledge about a situation or a lot of knowledge about a situation, which is reflected on that horizontal axis across the bottom. And then the continuum on the vertical axis is how well you're able to predict the outcome of any decisions or actions you make. And so when you think about this in terms of quadrants, we have the terms or the ideas, the concepts that turn into this made-up word VUCA. So we have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In the complexity frame, I'll use my laser pointer. When we think about complexity, these are situations where we don't know a lot about what's going on, but we can make some good predictions about, the actions we might take. And when I say we don't know a lot about what's going on, there are so many factors involved that it's really hard to understand the interconnectedness of things. So in any one circumstance within a complex situation, you might be able to predict the outcome of a certain path or decision, but there are so many decisions and so many variables involved that that task or that project or that event becomes really complex. Ambiguity is that kind of down in the corner quadrant, and that refers to a situation where you don't know a lot about what's going on, and you can't really predict what's going to happen if you go a certain way or you make a certain decision. And Sarah, I would think that this is kind of a space where that beginning of our cyber event sort of fell for us, which was, we didn't know the scope of the problem. We had no idea, is this one system? Is this a minor event? Or is this going to impact, a broader sense of the systems across our organization? Like, we just didn't have any idea. And so in some ways we were paralyzed in that beginning stage because we just didn't know how big the issue was. Mm-hmm. Then we have volatility, where we might know a lot, we might have a lot of information, and we might be able to predict the decision-making path and the outcomes of any one of those decisions that we might make, but we can't predict when a thing is going to happen. And this also rings true for a cyber event. You don't know, you can't predict when this kind of event is going to happen. And so that, the combination of not knowing things and sort of being caught off guard puts us all in this really heightened sense of anxiety and upheaval, and it's scary. It's really scary to think about what the potential impacts are on the entire system.
Yeah, Alan pointed out, will we make payroll? Because this did happen right before payroll was getting ready to run. And so it was, panic and the amount of anxiety and stress around that. It was interesting. Shelby asked me earlier, where would I have placed myself or where I thought we were in the middle of cyber attack, kind of in this framework. And I think for me, it kind of depended on maybe when you asked me that, or at the beginning or middle or end of the cyber, our response and recovery from that. And I think, how you interpret this can also depend on kind of where you are in the organization. Mm-hmm. If you're boots on the ground versus maybe an executive, level leader in the organization.
And then this last quadrant is also uncertainty. So you might know a lot about the situation. For example, we might know that at some point down the road, Google is going to change their pricing structure, or we might know that sometime down the road, certain types of requirements are going to change about something, but we don't have that timeline. We don't know when that's going to happen. And so it's hard to make decisions, even based on good information. It's hard to make good decisions within your organization about when to take action and what action to take. So this VUCA frame, it's all over the web. You can find it in a number of places. There's a great couple of articles from the Harvard Business Review, including one that includes some audio of somebody explaining each of the quadrants and giving really good business examples. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I totally encourage you to start doing some research. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that. So when we operate in a constant state of VUCA, and when everything is shifting and tasks, little or big, fall into these quadrants, there are some ill results. A VUCA environment can destabilize people. It can make them unmotivated because they can't predict what's coming. When you're in a constant state of reshaping and retooling and doing things from scratch over and over again, that is exhausting. We've all felt that kind of stress. Of course, it's a resource suck. It takes time. It takes effort. Increases the chances of people making bad decisions about things or paralyzing decision-making processes. If you're freaked out about the impact that your decision might have on something like payroll, it's really difficult to kind of own that decision and feel good about it without at least having some kind of structures in place to support good decision-making. They're overwhelming, and internal culture really takes a toll if you're in this constant state of VUCA and you're not taking steps to combat it or address it or lead with this context in mind. And then, of course, VUCA environments that are external, things that happen outside our organizations, can kind of bleed inwards if we're not focusing on culture, we're not focusing on building relationships and building resilient connections within our departments.
Yeah, and Shelby, it just reminded me of something that Tara shared earlier, that we can't create in a state of panic or fear. And, when we're responding to an event like this is sometimes when we need to be the most creative and have to think on our feet.
Yeah, for sure. So thinking about the frame that we've talked about, there are some areas that you can build up proactively. You can sort of think of these as muscles to combat and be resilient against VUCA situations or, a VUCA environment. And just a few are listed on this slide. There are certainly lots of good resources out there that talk about how to lead in a VUCA world. And I encourage you to do some research if that's interesting to you. But we're going to focus on 4 kind of areas that we think are pretty actionable when it comes to building up your culture in your team, in your department, in your organization. In the area of reliability, think about creating structures and routines that people can count on even when things go sideways. So if you have regular meetings or huddles, if you have team 10s or stand-ups or whatever, having those predictable routines can be something that people can lean on in times of crisis and count on as a place to get information, share information, hear what others are doing, process, what they're thinking and what's going on. And keeping those routines in place can be really, really powerful in a scary situation. If you have regular one-on-ones with team members, I would encourage you to consider keeping those in place as part of your sort of response plan, because as Tara said before, when anxiety is high and uncertainty is high, people's sort of emotional and mental needs increase and intensify. And it's really important for folks to have like this place where they can go and make sure that their needs are being met. And so that you as a leader, if you have direct reports, can understand what their concerns are. So keeping those structures in place is really important. In the area of trust, building trusting relationships before something goes bad can save your bacon when it gets into a situation where you need to rely on each other to make quick, agile decisions and trust that the people around you are making those decisions with the best information, and so that they can trust that you are making those good decisions as well. There's nothing worse than not having that sturdy foundation of trust and then trying to make a decision that others don't necessarily buy into because they don't feel that shared sense of interest. One of the best ways to build trust is to listen and to also share stories and experiences. Whether those are work-related or not work-related, having those shared experiences can really build a foundation of trust that you can lean on in times of crisis. Curiosity is a really important factor, and it's not one we talk about a whole lot because a lot of us in technical fields pride ourselves in knowing all the things. We're really good at knowing the acronyms and speaking the jargon and being really smart about our field and about our areas of expertise. But building a culture of curiosity within your team or your organization, a place where it's safe for people to ask questions or to try to unpack a process and ask, the why behind why we made that decision or, what the impact of something might be, can mean better decision making when things go south. So we're going to talk about this idea of shifting from a knowing stance to a learning stance. And if you're a Brené Brown fan, you'll hear her language in that description. But getting out of the space of just knowing all the things and getting into the space of being able to learn about all the things can be a really powerful tool in your toolkit in combating crisis. And then finally, relationships, investing in the people in your team, in your department, knowing your staff by strength and need, just like we would know our students as educators by strength and need, is again an asset when it comes to knowing how to delegate tasks or put people in positions where they're going to be the most successful and the most effective when it comes to that quick decision-making crisis-based delegation. And then Sarah will talk about this a little bit later, but the idea of connecting outside of your department and having those relationships before crisis hits can be something to lean on in bad times.
Yeah, and Shelby, I just wanted to add too that, I think we've probably got people attending that are at a variety of different kind of leadership levels in their organizations. And, it would be ideal if every organization led like this from the top down, but we know that isn't necessarily the reality for everybody. But, we can lead like this in our departments or with our smaller teams and still have a huge impact on our teams and our ability to respond to crisis situations.
Absolutely. So my spirit animal, Brene Brown, has done a lot of work on shame and vulnerability, and you've probably read one or more of her books, or are at least familiar with her work. And one of the concepts that she has been talking about most recently in her podcasts is this notion of moving from being a knower to being a learner, or moving from a knowing stance to a learning stance. And the idea of a knowing stance is, I know all the things. When I'm in a meeting, I'm, making sure that everybody knows that I know all the things. I'm quick to answer questions and quick to offer knowledge. And there's a little bit of this in all of us, right? We are all at some point in some context, we're a knower, we know things. What Brene says is that is a form of armored leadership, or it's a form of armor that we carry when we put the pressure on ourselves to know all the things and be that smartest person in the room. And she contends that if you can shift into a learning stance, that not only do you end up getting the best of other people and better ideas from even yourself, but you open yourself up to thinking about situations in innovative ways. And what more, what better time to be innovative and creative than in crisis, right? If we're stuck in what we've always done, and we do the things that we've always done the way that we've always done them, and we don't stop to question, how can we do this better? Or, what if we unpack this and think about it in a different way? Or are there experts out there that could help us think about this in a way that we haven't had a chance to think about? If we don't turn to that learning stance, we miss a huge opportunity to improve our practice. So I don't need to read this quote to you, but this is from her book, Dare to Lead. And she really talks about the unfortunate impacts of sticking in that knowing stance, being in that place. Sarah, anything to say about that? Nope. All right. So there are definitely some things that we can do, some specific actions to take. And there's a link, Sarah, if you want to throw that link from the presenter notes into the chat, and then people can see the blog post about this. There are some specific strategies that you can take either as a leader or as somebody's direct report to move from that knowing to learning stance. And the first is to sort of recognize when the knowing is getting in the way. Are you the only person speaking in the meeting? Are you telling, or are you asking? And just sort of recognizing that that there's that awareness. And you can recognize that in others too. If you have direct reports and you notice, like if I'll just pretend that Sarah's my direct report. I could say something like, Sarah, I've noticed that you have a lot to say in our meetings. You're contributing a lot of information. And I wonder what it would be like for you to ask some questions in the meeting instead of telling some facts and giving some information in the meeting, because I think it might help not only you think about a situation differently, but you have the potential to help other people come to understand this process better. So I wonder what questions you could ask in that meeting or about that process that might help others. So just recognizing that is really important. Acknowledging when people do take a learning stance and celebrating it is really important, because if you're not celebrating it and you're not modeling and making sure that people understand that that is a good thing to do and this is a safe place to do that, then they're more likely to stop that behavior, right? We want to sort of reward the things that we want to see more of. So whenever somebody asks a great question, even if it's a stumper in a meeting, or it sort of feels like, oh my gosh, nobody has the answer to that. If it's a great question, acknowledge it, because that's okay. It's okay for us not to have all the answers, especially in a crisis. It takes practice too. Sometimes when Sarah and I meet, and we meet pretty frequently because we've become very close professional partners, I find myself practicing questions on Sarah when I want to try on a new thing or think about something in a different way, I will ask questions of Sarah that help me understand a situation better, but I would hope also help Sarah think about how she might ask that question to one of her direct reports, or how she might think about a situation differently. So it takes practice, and some people aren't, unfortunately, some people aren't naturally curious. And so for those strong knowers, those experts, right, or the beginning experts, kind of what Tara was talking about before, it's going to take more practice for them to get used to asking those good questions.
Yeah, I would say, Shelby, I absolutely benefit from that. And that does help me kind of slow down in my interactions with my staff. I might be not necessarily be a knower in the interaction, but a lot of times I react and I don't ask for more information. So it absolutely kind of trickles down and trickles across, the organization, the benefits of doing that. Yeah.
And then last, Brene asks us to think about shifting from being right, I'm right about this fact, I know this thing, to getting it right, which is a slightly subtly different approach to making sure that we're doing the right thing for the greater good, right? In this case, it'll be, making sure in a cyber attack that payroll is made, or that, systems come back up so learning can continue. Not necessarily in that order.
How you doing out there? Can you get a thumbs up if you're still awake?
Robert Paul's awake. He says in chat that Dare to Lead is a great book study for IT teams. It totally is. I feel like Brene brings so much to the, awesome.
I stole Shelby's.
Brene brings a lot to the table in so many different sort of business environments and educational environments. And I've just found so much that resonates with me in her work. So thank you, Robert.
Thank you for the feedback. It's hard. I mean, there's 64 people in the room, and Shelby and I are used to having all the tables in front of us and getting to hear the rumblings and the partner talk and all of that. So thank you. So we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit. What was that, Shelby?
Robert says she also swears often, hence the reason she's my spirit animal. I mean, it's been challenging for me not to throw in some bombs in this session, but I will keep it professional.
Don't worry, if you have the closed captioning on, it'll censor it.
I couldn't get it to turn on because I wanted to demonstrate that it asterisks out part of the words. But
you have to turn it on. People have to turn it on for themselves. I mean, we could help them test that out, but the session's being recorded, so
we'll do that at the end. We'll stop recording and then do
Our boss is here. It's cool.
I've heard us swear before. Come on.
He uses phrases like jackwagon.
Oh, bop. He says bop and bounce. He's like 112 years old. It's amazing. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to shift and talk a little bit about response. Okay, the thing has happened. Your systems are down. There's a banana in the server room. North Shore people will get the reference.
Oh no!
Everything's down. First of all, you might cry a little bit. It's cool. But
or a lot.
Or a lot, you find yourself in the fetal position in your office. It's okay. That's normal. But it's a big project. So, I mean, there are some practical things to be prepared for and that you will benefit from doing right off the bat. Pick a coordinator. Really, it's a project manager, somebody who can zoom out and see the big picture and identify what are the things that need to happen. Do some task analysis, assign that to the appropriate people, and then hold people accountable. Come back to that work regularly. In North Shore, we were fortunate. Alan pulled somebody in specifically that has worked with our department before to specifically help us stay on track with that work. Before we had that person in place, for me, Shelby was that person to zoom back and say, what is the problem that you're trying to solve right now? So as an organization, to have a lead, a ringmaster, a cat herder, whatever you want to call that person, that can really stay, at that high balcony level and make sure everybody's doing their tasks and all the, start to put the puzzle pieces back together. I think. Shelby, is there anything else you'd like to say about that? You have to change slides for me.
No, I know that, and this might be a practice that other folks Oh, bigger stuff's weighing in on the banana in the server room. Other folks may use this task too, but we have this practice in North Shore amongst several of our teams where we call it a brain dump or a board dump or we've done a heat map or whatever. And basically it involves standing in front of a whiteboard and just getting it all out, like not in any sort of organized fashion, not in any sort of, specific or structured way, but just getting all the stuff out of all the brains and into a place where all the brains can see all the stuff, so that then you can start organizing things. We still do this today, even digitally. We use a tool called Miro to do our brain dumping, which is fabulous. But being able to list all those tasks and get them out of the various heads gives you a starting point for starting to get them organized. And that was the beginning of what I would say was I would say one of the best artifacts from the cyber situation was coming out with this huge, system architecture diagram that showed us all the interconnectedness between all of these in-house and hosted services and how they were all connected to each other. And my brain increased by 7 sizes just being able to interact in that scenario. I learned a ton. So just a fun little story.
Thank you. We have lots of little stories we can pepper in. So I'm going to switch a little bit and talk about SCARF. If you attended our last in-person ACPE and the session with Shelby and I, we talked about SCARF a lot. VUCA is kind of a framework to think about your environment or kind of the culture or the problem you're facing. SCARF is a framework to think about the people you are kind of working with or leading or attending to. So the brain is wired. The concept of SCARF is, your brain is wired to respond to threats and rewards. And these are 5 areas where you can minimize threats and maximize rewards for people. So these are really good areas to think about when you're dealing with conflict or trying to motivate somebody on your team. So they are status, the relative importance to each other. Is my status within the organization important to me? And is something you're doing or a decision you're making or information I feel like you're withholding from me threatening my status in the organization? And what can I as a leader do to make you feel safe or help you understand that your status isn't being threatened, right? Certainty is one that definitely, for me within cyber attack was huge, right? I didn't know how things were going to pan out. And that for me and my brain was a threat. And how are we going to come out of this? Autonomy, the sense of control over events. And, I think we all know what autonomy is. And, my independence and your ability to trust me to do things, relatedness, our safety with each other, and fairness. I have a staff member for which, North Shore people, it's anonymous, autonomy, status, and fairness are hugely important. And this is a person that we sometimes have conflict, healthy, good conflict. And these are things that I've really worked on to get to know about this person. And this is work that happened well before cyber attack. So all the things that Shelby was talking about earlier was that SCARF is another thing you can do well before the cyber attack. And because I knew these things about her, when we were in the middle of our cyber attack response, we had some conflict. And they felt like, they were left out of decisions and information wasn't being shared with them. And they felt, disrespected. And first of all, they felt comfortable coming and talking to me about it. So we already had established trust and relationship that benefited us there. And I was able to ask more questions, do some reflection, step back, and not react right away. So I'm using some of my kind of learner leadership, daring leadership strategies. And then I was really able to see that, she she feels like her status is being threatened here. She's being left out of the loop. She's not important. She's not being included in the information sharing. So it allowed me to kind of see that and think about what structures could we put in place to help not just her, but the rest of the team. Because if this person's feeling that way, other people on the team may be feeling that way as well, because there's a lack of information. And honestly, at the time, I didn't have any information. There was a lot of, in the cyber attack, we didn't know. There were so many times where you just had to shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know what's next. I'm going to figure it out. Trust me that I will share that information with you as soon as I have it. So we ended up putting some regular, I think we had 5 or 10 minute just stand-up meetings every morning during the cyber attack. And that's actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but that's actually a strategy we re-implemented when COVID started and we all went to remote work. Is we have, not every day, but 3 days a week, we have morning meetings where we check in and we connect. And some of them are work related and have some structure, and some of them are, coffee talk, and we don't get to talk shop at all. But that's one of those structures and strategies that we revived in the midst of another crisis, and a thing that we really learned through the cyber attack. What's next?
It's like a
What's next?
This is my favorite slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shelby, could you bop to the next slide?
Oh, I'll bounce to the next slide for you. No problem.
Would you like to do this one?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
This was your favorite slide.
I want to go back for just a sec. And
absolutely.
Robert asked in the chat to talk about fairness. So in the context of cyber stuff, I would say fairness pops up when people feel like someone else might be getting more information, or someone else might be getting more resource. And sometimes this can pop up outside of your department. So you might have for example, in the cyber attack, we had multiple departments that were impacted. We had food services was impacted because our, point of sale system and food tracking thing was hosed. And so they had no way to track kids and meals and milks and juices and fruits and things. We also had a payroll situation, and we don't have infinite resources to be able to tackle all of these things like all at once. And so I think there was definitely moments early on where, our friends in food services were feeling this like, why are other folks getting more resources than we are? Our situation is just as important. Not to say that payroll and, milk aren't on the same level of priority, but there's definitely this sense of, I'm not getting the same amount or an equitable share of the resources. Internally, I would say fairness pops up sometimes when there's a perception that somebody is getting more, not just more resource, but more opportunity than someone else. So you might have folks on a team that share the same role, but one person feels like someone else on the team is receiving more opportunity for leadership growth, or to do new things or to innovate. And so when that perception shows up, it's really important to recognize it and not address it by just making things equal, but having conversations about, how the decision came to be that this person got to be the lead on that special project, and what, areas of growth might the person who didn't get that opportunity focus on to move into that kind of space.
Yeah, Shelby, I was thinking, specifically within the cyber attack too, I think everybody wanted to help, right? I can contribute, I can help. And, I'll say my 2 tech support help desk phone people, they wanted to help. I want to help. We can do this. How can we help? And for me, my decision was, I need you to stay on those phones. I need you to answer it for people, make sure they're getting answers. That's really important that we keep that stable and expected, for people, because everything else is in turmoil. So while it feels like you're not helping with the cyber response. You are. And that's really important that we keep that in place and we keep that consistent and we keep caught up on what we can keep caught up on so that other people can be doing these other specific things regarding the response.
And I was mistaken. It was Todd that asked the question about fairness. But I would say, and Sarah, you can tell me if this experience has been different for you, but since learning about this notion of SCARF, which is really based on brain research, like your brain responds positively when these things are good and you're getting lots of, reward around these feelings. But since learning about this a number of years ago, I find myself seeing it in different places around the organization, whether it's a situation I'm involved in or not involved in, whether it's a situation with my children. I have 2 daughters, and I pick up on, every time I ask one of my kids to empty the dishwasher, their immediate response is, what is the other one doing? Like, there's no, okay. It's like, there's this immediate fairness thing that gets triggered in my kids, and I notice it and I acknowledge it, and then we find ways to address it. So little parenting fun there. But is that true for you, Sarah? Do you find that you're seeing SCARF in lots of different places?
I see it in myself.
Oh, interesting.
Well, probably only because you ask me questions that make me think about it.
Oh,
so there's a little bit of that. It's good. It's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing to be able to do. And I don't quite see it so much yet in my little one, but she also doesn't have a sibling to, bounce that off of yet at all. So.
Well, I'm sure she does it at daycare.
I'm sure. I don't
know what Todd Corn's offended by, but that's just sort of a standard state for Todd, I think. So.
It's okay. We still love Todd.
Yeah.
Even though he's a hipster, it's cool.
Well, and if you're Todd, you leave North Shore in the middle of a cyber attack. That's fun times too, right?
Thanks, Sarah? Todd.
Thanks, Todd. Go to Everett, whatever. Anyways, so this is my favorite part of talking about the cyber attack, because the rest of it was kind of horrific. But the biggest thing we learned, I would say for me, was, and this is really the core of tending to the human needs. There are some basic human needs that are easy to forget about when every single person in your team is head down, working their butts off to try to recover and bring systems back up. I mean, I saw people in the early stages of this situation, I saw people like sweaty. And like, I'd never seen some of our techs and system admins like physically responding to the stress of this environment. I'd never seen that before. And as someone who is probably as far away from the technical in our department as you can get, I felt helpless. I felt like I was watching people in my department crumble and work 12 hours at a time and like not eat and not take breaks. I don't remember who I asked first, but I went to maybe Sarah or Alan or somebody, and I was just like, these people need to eat. Like, the people aren't eating. I'm walking around the department and they're not like, people are not taking breaks and they look terrible. They're sweaty. And like, so we quickly put some, just try to put some structures in place to tend to these basic needs. I remember this one day making a Costco run. Somebody made a Costco run and we had like muffins and snacks and stuff. And I literally, because I have no technical skill to be able to recover a payroll system, I was the food cart person at work. Like I walked around the department and I was like, may I offer you a muffin? May I offer you some levity? I will make a joke about this, Cliff Bar or whatever, but please eat something.
We had other departments asking us, how can we help? And I think we said, you can bring food for the people that are working overnight or working on the weekends. And we had frozen pizzas and we had all sorts of things.
For sure. As a team member or as a leader, it's really important to tell people to get rest. Sleep is restorative. We all know the importance of sleep. And I was noticing quickly, as I think other leaders in our department were noticing too, there were people that weren't sleeping. They were literally working for 12 hours, kind of maybe going home, but not like coming back in the same clothes or something. Like, it was kind of crazy. And if people aren't sleeping and they're not tending to that basic need, they are not effective. So making sure that you're noticing the signs, you're, noticing if somebody's suffering from a lack of sleep and you're encouraging them to, take breaks. Your brain needs a break. That's how we process, right? During sleep and during breaks where we're not thinking about the task in front of us is when our brain, really processes and thinks those things through. So making sure people take breaks and figuring out ways to delegate tasks to people.
And I think too, being strategic about, giving John Biggerstaff permission and direction to go home and take a nap and know that this person's on the schedule right now, working on this thing.
Yeah.
And or giving him a quiet place to work where he's uninterrupted as well.
Yeah. North Shore is a big fan of laughter, as I'm sure you can tell. And those of you that have known us for a long time know we like to laugh. And there are, it's certainly fun to be in an environment where people are laughing, but there's also some brain science behind it. Dopamine is created when you're laughing and having shared experiences with people. And I'll tell you, I feel so much closer to the people in my department and I care so much more about them. That sounds really harsh, but I care so much more about them as family members than I probably ever would before, simply for going through the crisis and then COVID. So, I love them all dearly. Making sure people get out and move, go for a walk, assuming the weather is decent enough to get outside, get some fresh air. Movement is really important for our bodies. We don't want muscles to atrophy or, heart conditions to rise up or blood pressure to go, in the tubes. Like we gotta make sure people are taking time to move. And God, people would not go home. Sarah, do you remember this? They were like, no, I could do this one more thing. I could get this one more task done. It's like people need to know when it's okay to go home. So as leaders, it's important for us to go home. And it's important to make sure that perhaps we are the last out the door, making sure that our staff is taking good care of themselves and taking time with their family. This is so critical. Is this me? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to let it be you.
It's me. I'm just going to keep talking until you mute me or something.
Totally fine. I'll be next.
So SCARF and VUCA and tending to human needs is not just about you and your direct reports or even the folks just sort of laterally around you in the department. It flows in all directions. And it's really important for us to keep those basic needs and that, frame for the brain in mind as we're thinking about not just the people that report to us, but also the folks that are lateral partners and also those that are above us in the food chain, if you will, to make sure that we're tending to all of those needs in the best ways that we can, provided the role that we're in. So for direct reports, folks that are looking to you for supervision, making sure you maintain those routines, having your stand-ups and your huddles and your one-on-ones, taking time to get out of the weeds once in a while and just step back and look at that big picture and do that kind of environmental scan. I remember, we keep kind of veering into the COVID situation, but I have a picture at the end of this presentation of stepping back during the first days of the COVID shutdown and just watching the instructional tech team work hard. There's no better way to describe it. They were all on the phone. They were all, multitasking and doing a million things to try to address getting, 1,100 teachers shifted to remote learning. And it was just a moment for me to step back and sort of just, how is this going? And sort of look at each of my staff members and kind of assess the situation. So getting into the habit of doing that and not being the knower all the time, not being the haver of all the ideas and the solutions is a really important part of leading a team. From a lateral standpoint, especially in crisis, there are other people in the organization that are impacted by the decisions you make, whether they report to you or you report to them. Hold on, Doug.
Everything okay?
Everything, yeah. He wants to participate, so he's here now. Just really, tending to those relationships and making sure you have open lines of communication in other parts of the organization is really important because, as Sarah will tell you in a little bit, you can rely on those people to help you when times get tough, but also having those relationships can give you systems of support in other parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Shelby, I'll also say with lateral friends, just within our department, I think it is absolutely important to look outside your department and to have established relationships and to lean on those. But even within our organization, between you, me, and John and Alan, The leaders in that, it was very much like, how can I support John? John oversees network and servers. Like, his team was hugely impacted. And so my first thought that Saturday when I got the call is, how can I support John? And then I also felt the same from you. When I was in the weeds, I was able to lean on you as my peer, to help me figure out how to step back and manage the situation more effectively. So I think those relationships inside the department are important, as well as the ones outside.
I would agree with that. If you're not tending to those relationships and creating those strong bonds, I mean, you don't have to love each other. You don't have to like be besties and like hang out outside of work. But if you're not tending to those interpersonal connections at work, when things go sideways, then what do you have to rely on to make sure you have good communication, to make sure you're collaborating, to make sure that you're tending to the needs of all the different people in the department? Like, you at least need to have a good collegial professional bond and relationship, right?
Because
important things.
People can probably guess that you and I have, a good relationship both at work and outside of work. But my relationship with John is, we've put a lot of work into that. And it's at a place where, I trust him to be able to answer the questions that I think for me to ask the questions that I think are stupid. Yeah. Right. And he doesn't think they're stupid. And I know that he reciprocates that respect. And so to be able to foster that relationship, John and I aren't besties outside of work, but we do put a lot of work into that relationship inside our organization.
For sure. And then lastly, I'll just say supervisors count too. Alan is our supervisor and he's in the room, so I'll make sure to keep it professional. But I will say there were moments where I could tell that Alan was in one of those scarf places, and it was more than once, because he was getting either pressure from or feeling the effects of the impact on the whole organization in a way that Sarah and I really couldn't. So there were definitely times where I could take a step back and sort of see what was going on for Alan and try to be proactive and kind of manage from the middle, if you will, and proactively give him information that I thought would support him in his conversations with his supervisors and with folks above him in the food chain. Because at the end of the day, as an executive director, he can't possibly be in the weeds in every sort of pocket that was going on. So it was really important to keep those lines of communication open and to make sure he eats too, right? Yeah. Give the guy a fritter or a donut or a sandwich or something. Like, his needs are just as important.
I mean, and he showed up on a weekend. He showed up on a Saturday or Sunday where I didn't expect him to. There was I think there was no real reason he needed to be there on site, but he was. And I really appreciated that.
Oatmeal cookies with raisins, and I won't hold it against him. It's all right. Okay.
Oh, Shelby, you want to do this slide?
No, this is not my baby.
I was totally kidding. So this is a picture as Shelby and I were preparing. I started to go through my phone to look for hey, I'm sure we have some pictures of, when we had all the people on site, when we were responding to cyber attack and all of that. And honestly, we were so in the weeds. There really aren't many pictures, but there were lots of moments where we had tons of people on site. But this is a picture of that Sunday, the 20th or 21st or whatever it was. I had worked all day on site with John's team, and we had deployed people out to every school site to unplug every PC until we could kind of hatch our kind of official response plan. I came home and I was still smiling, go figure, but kind of, snuggled with my family and my daughter. And it just made me think about the importance of taking care of myself during that time. And it was complex. It was not this is going to be over in 2 days event. And I knew it. And it was one of those points in time where everybody is touting self-care during COVID, but I did have to be really intentional about asking for help and identifying what I needed. And as a leader in that kind of event, that I think is what allowed me to sustain the leadership and to be able to kind of get through it, for the long haul and support my team and the organization with that recovery effort. Some specific things that I did, I had to figure out how to articulate to my spouse how catastrophic this was and how big of a deal this was. This was hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully a once in a career event that I have a responsibility to respond to. And so being able to figure out how to help the people in your life understand what it is, if it is, if you feel that responsibility and that you're going to be in the weeds and really heavily involved in this kind of response, it can take a little bit of work to help articulate and help them understand, like, what does this really mean? Mm-hmm. Every system came down. People aren't going to get paid, or we have to figure out how to pay people. So that was one piece. So figuring out how to have those conversations was important. Asking for help at home. Tara earlier kind of talked about, some of the things that women, in the workplace deal with. For me, there was just this added pressure of like, well, I got to get my kid to and from daycare and I have to have meals and all of these other things that I asked for help. My mom came and stayed with us for 2 weeks, took care of my kid, did the laundry, did the things, because this, being able to respond to this and to know that my family was taken care of was important to me. But I had to identify and really ask for that help. And I think as a leader, as somebody, I'm kind of in the middle of the organization too. So I think those, above should know that your people that are on the ground may need help. They may not have a mom that can come stay with them for 2 weeks, but it is still important to them to be a vital part of the recovery effort. And what support might they need? Maybe you have single parents that, you're supervising somebody who's a single parent, and they're a critical part of your organization. How can they take care of their family and still be, doing this work that they really care about?
Yeah, for sure. I would just add that our district, like many districts, also offers mental health support. And I would say more often during the cyber situation recovery, we referenced, I think it was Far West, and there's another program I think that gets referenced as well. And we were sure to make sure that people understood that not only were those services available, but there would be no stigma and no shame associated with reaching out and taking advantage of those services.
Yeah. That was something that, I'll share. That was something that I did, and I didn't use Far West. So I already got my own stuff set up, but right, like reaching out and getting formal support, recognizing both when I needed that and looking at the people around me, right? Stepping back, looking at the people I'm leading and identifying, hey, you seem like you're really struggling here. You've got a lot of anxiety. Are you sleeping? Are you getting the help that you need? Do you know what your resources are? So those are really important things. And again, there shouldn't be stigma attached to it. And I think that for me right now, Shelby resonates even more during COVID. Like I very much support my staff that say, I need to have a counseling session at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. Sign off. Make sure the things aren't dinging while you're doing that, and we'll see you at 11 or whatever, the next time. So supporting those things is important.
I put my kids in the bathtub and gave them a sandwich and called it good. I didn't. They're old enough. They didn't.
Abby was also like, Abby was 2.5 or 3 or something at the time. Like it just
bathtub and a sandwich. What else do you need, right?
Yeah. And I will say the last thing about that, is just really like having some boundaries at some point, like turning the things off, modeling that for your people, that it's okay. Like I'm going to turn off my email. I'll look at it in the morning. And I know Alan knows how to get a hold of me if there's an emergency. And it's okay to do that. I don't expect you to be looking at your email. I'm not going to email you after hours. So modeling those things for our staff is important so that they really do take those cues and they feel comfortable saying, I need to take an afternoon off. I need to go do this thing, and advocate for their own needs as well. So
I'm just paying attention to the clock. I want to make sure that we get it.
we got 15 minutes of stuff to.
I know.
Just a few things to get through. Communicate. Is this me or you?
It's got your name on it.
It has my name on it? All right, let's do it. I'll do it.
Is your name Communicate?
Do I have to communicate? Well, I had to get through my own, like, share my own story piece. Sorry. So yeah, communication was huge, right? You've got if you have a project manager over this, there are huge pieces to communicate. You have and a variety of different types of communication. So internal communication, which is, within your department and your teams, and kind of making sure it's clear what information needs to be shared with whom. You've got external, which we define here within this context as communication within the district, but not public. So we need to communicate information with our teaching staff, our unions, on and other constituents on what is next, how this is impacting them, how they can access resources, how they can continue on with teaching and learning. Communication to what we'll call C-suite level administrators. It looks different than what we're providing to our internal staff, right? So thinking strategically about the types of communications or briefings that are given to folks at kind of that upper kind of level of administration, and making sure that communication is in a language they can understand. Right, it's clear to them what's happening and what the impacts are to the organization. And then public communication, letting the public know what's going on, how our response effort is coming, what the impacts are to their students and to the organization. There were a lot of questions about data breaches. Was our student data accessed or compromised? So just being really cognizant of community concerns and being able to respond to those in a timely manner and in an accurate manner. And I think answer no. And being able to, answer them within the, restraints. There's legal restraints. There's lawyers involved. There's a response effort going on. So there's a lot of things to juggle and consider in that public communication piece.
For sure.
Anything else to add?
Oh, I clicked forward on that slide, but not this one.
Oh, there we go.
What time is it? Is it like 10 o'clock? Is it time to go to the Mallards, Sarah?
I know. Well, where's our Jarties?
Oh my gosh. The only thing I would add about communication just really quick is that notion of reliability and predictability applies to, C-suite staff as well as the public. So when you're communicating, keeping the same structure, anticipating the needs of the audience, right? So if it's C-suite, like having the same format, the same sort of cadence to your communications, not dumbing things down, but giving them something that they can easily pick up on as a routine, especially if this is going to drag out over a couple of months. Same thing for the public. These are important structures to have in place that, oh, that's interesting. Important structures to have in place for communication efforts.
Sorry, I'm making a face.
Way to the chat. I'm so distracted.
Sorry, did you see what I was making
about
the
this
face of the emoji I was picking?
Yeah, talk about this picture, because this is a fun one.
Yeah, so I'm leaning on relationships outside the department. This is one of the few pictures I could find of kind of one of our first weekend response efforts, and this is just a small percentage of the people that went out on a Saturday or Sunday to every school campus, and we have 35-ish of those to unplug PCs, and not not pictured in this room are people from HR. Todd Corn, people from micro K-12. So there are a lot of people, school technology specialists, folks from within our own department that were not necessarily impacted. So all our instructional technology coordinators who just said, how can I help? So a huge group of people. I believe I had 24 people come in on a Sunday. I think I contacted them on a Saturday afternoon, and I had a whole crew in on a Sunday and a plan to get them out the door. So really leveraging those, I mean, this is one way, you know, having those existing relationships outside of the department benefited us. Just, you know, our business analyst in HR and our benefits director in HR were out at buildings. Unplugging things. It was awesome. Yes, thank you, Alan. Alan, Chris is on my, Edmonds is on my list. They sent a systems guy to help us rebuild our SCCM for PC management. And they reached out to us and said, how can we help? And once we were able to kind of put some pieces together and identify what we needed help with, we were able to reach out. They sent a guy to come help us get that off the ground. So there were lots of resources that allowed us to get through that successfully. We could not have done it on our own. Shelby, I saw your hand.
Oh, I was just trying to make sure we caught the Edmonds acknowledgement, because I remember somebody saying early on, I wonder if Edmonds can help. And it was like within a heartbeat, we had, how can we help? And having those district partners is invaluable. And
I think, the other piece of that is that was overwhelming to start with too. I think there were a lot of people I know that reached out to Alan that said, you know, how can we help? Let us know what you need. And you know, it took us some time to get our feet under us and to be able to identify what we needed help with. And again, that's where like a project manager right off the bat, identifying a person to help you figure those pieces out is key.
Jeff Miller also just put in the chat to remind us to acknowledge Highline, because Finstrom was right on the ball and sent us a person. And I remember I remember when I walked in on that Sunday and Mark's guy was there, and I didn't recognize him, but he sounded like the smart dude who knew what to do. Like, I didn't know who he was, and I knew he wasn't from North Shore, but I was like, this dude must have been called in because he knows all the things. And it was so great to have that calm, like knowledgeable, not a knower, but like a person who was there to initially herd cats and like ask us questions about things was fabulous.
Get us thinking about the right things. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I can breeze through this one. I won't read the quote for you, but you know, finding ways to celebrate small victories was really important to us. Aside from food, every time a new service came back online, there was like a bell we would ring around the department, and it was annoying as all get out, but it felt so good to be able to acknowledge kind of those small little things. I mean, it might have been the smallest service, but we got one more thing back back on board. And so those small wins are good, and that I will say that ritual and that routine has continued in our organization since then. Not with the bell though.
Not with the bell.
I don't think Alan wouldn't have that.
So it did take a while for the dust to settle, but it did eventually, and we did kind of come down the other side of the mountain, so to speak. And we did have a chance on several occasions, both internally and with a consultant. We had a chance to kind of look back on the situation and do this really thorough review. We had a consultant come in and kind of go through that with us and ask all the questions we hadn't thought to think about, but also to, you know, we did internal reflection and review to make sure that if this were to happen again, you know, what could be different. So a bunch of questions listed here on this slide for things that we thought about, and that I think to this day we've documented in a way that we never would have had that event not occurred. You know, this was a great opportunity and a catalyst to move a bunch of stuff to hosted systems that we hadn't had the time or the resource to do. And because there was this urgency and because we had support from above, like it was this huge, effort that would have probably taken us years to get around had we not experienced this kind of situation. But I think more importantly, and most importantly, at least from my perspective, is we saw some cultural shifts within our department. We bonded over a shared experience. We understand now what happens in crisis. We had a chance to really make some connections and actually make some, shifts in assignments and in staffing to help us better create agile environments so that we're not one deep and we're not, single silos of information and things like that. So I think there's been some really good outcomes. And it just so happened that this all got to be put to use pretty quickly when we had to shift to remote learning. We had just come out of the cyber attack, started in September 2019, and come March 2020, or February, I should say, COVID hit. And as you know, North Shore was the first in the country to shift to completely remote learning on a dime. Like again, much like the cyber attack, we met on a Sunday, a huge group of people from all over the organization. We met on a Sunday, just like we did for cyber attack, got our head around what needed to happen, did that sort of virtual brain dump of all the things, put a plan together. And by, I think, that Wednesday, which happened to be my birthday, we shifted to remote learning, like literally on a dime. And I think that knowing what we knew and learning what we had learned from the cyber attack really helped us to make that shift pretty agilely, I should say. And this is a picture of the instructional tech coordinators on, I think, day 2 or something like that of the shift to remote. And we had created a hotline that rang to all of the different phones and all of the places. And this is one of those moments where I just, as a leader, I had to kind of step back and do an environmental scan and understand what was happening with my team. And I remember this moment so viscerally because the phone never stopped ringing and the work never stopped. And it was so important for me and for them, for me to not live in the weeds and to make sure that Josh took a break and got to, step away from his devices. And Gavin had to go lift things up and put things down or go outside. And Pete had to ride his bike. And this was like Maddie's second day in this job. So it was just survival mode for Maddie, and she did it like a champ. So both in terms of the cyber attack and in the shift to remote learning, I will say something that Alan mentioned in the chat. We have a deputy superintendent that we had built a strong relationship with that helped cut through some of the decision-making stuff in both of these crises. And having that solid relationship and trust with someone above us in the organization has made all the difference in both of these situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to make sure we end on time, and we only have a couple of minutes, but I really do appreciate, I appreciate you, Sarah. I really love working with you, and I love that we can have a session like this and be conversational and continue to grow in our ability to lead and also to work together. And I also want to make sure that as a presenter, I give a shout out to our vendors and sponsors, because if not for them, ACPE would not be a thing. And it would not there would not be the opportunity for us to come together and learn from each other. So it's important that I say, go visit vendors, go sit at tables, go interact with them, and be sure that at some point you express your gratitude for them.
Yeah, a shout out to Micro K-12.
Yeah,
Micro K-12. They were a huge part of our recovery effort. So. Shelby, thank you. I appreciate you too. And I love that we get to partner in this and kind of share our experience with folks from the, maybe less technical, but more, not less important, leadership and human side of things. So
humans are systems too. Uh-oh. Kelly's talking, but I think her network connection might be bogus. Maybe Kelly can move her mouth and I'll just make the words. It'll be like a ventriloquist show. I am Kelly, and I am amazing, and my lipstick is awesome, and I'm super, super smart. It's true. It's true. It's true. Okay. I don't think there's any questions in Q&A. I really appreciate everybody showing up today. It was fun to have chats with you in the in the chat. Where will we be later in the conference? You can find us on Discord. We can Discord. Is that a verb? I'm not sure it's a verb, but we can definitely do that.
And
we
I will
addresses.
I will only be here through tomorrow, but yeah, you can find me on Discord, or our email addresses are up there. So feel free to reach out.
Love you.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Oh, but I can't. Can I end the session?
I'll end it. I have the button here.
End it.
Ending.